Welcome to the City of Cinema, not Hollywood, but Paris in the 19th century. This exhibition is a co-organization between the Los Angeles County Museum of Art and the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. It opened in Paris in September 2021 and is on view at LACMA through July 2022. My co-curators and I will be walking you through 5 stops within the exhibition, culminating in a screening area we're calling the Salle de Cinéma, evoking a purpose-built movie theater which emerged in Paris around 1906-1907 and marks the endpoint of our exhibition.
Paris offered not just a spectacle of modern life, but it also framed that spectacle and projected images all over the city streets. I'm standing in front of a replica of a Morris column, the ubiquitous street furniture that was part of the 19th century transformation of the city's streets, and it was a place that was dedicated to posters advertising all kinds of theatrical spectacles and other events that could be found in the city. Posters were known as a mobile and degenerate art form, and you can see them throughout our exhibition. Many of them emphasize color and light and motion in a way that many people have argued prefigures the rise of cinema. Behind me, you can see that theme of posters being animated and coming to life in a film by Georges Méliès, known in English as The Hilarious Posters, in which images literally come to life and people emerge from the frame of the poster and start to parade in front of the kiosk. Our exhibition is grounded in the social, political, and cultural transformations of 19th century Paris. This involved the modernization of the city, the broadening of city streets to make grand thoroughfares and boulevards for large crowds and public modes of transportation to take in the spectacle of modern life. While we associate this spectacle of modern life with a glittering bourgeois culture, we also pay attention to the much larger public of 19th century Paris. Young students who are part of the mandatory education of the 19th century French Third Republic. Also, we wanted to emphasize the fact that not everyone in Paris was part of this new glittering bourgeoisie, and we also show that there's a kind of darker side to the transformations of modern Paris as well, as this Pélez painting behind me suggests, a poor mother with her children sitting on the streets of Paris with tattered posters behind her.
As my colleagues mentioned, we're tracing in this exhibition how spectators are built and how audiences are formed. And one of the ways in which we do that is to present to our audiences specific sites of consumption. At the end of the 19th century, France was committed to the ideas and the beliefs that their culture was sort of central and universal to the world. And one of the ways in which they showcased these ideas was through the Universal Expositions. These were giant World's Fairs shown every 11 years in the second half of the 19th century. For the purposes of our exhibition, we wanted to focus on 2 World's Fairs. The World's Fair of 1889, for which the Eiffel Tower was built, and the World's Fair of 1900, the first to showcase cinema. Now, in this framework, we were able to examine the idea of the world coming to Paris. We do this through the spectators that visit the fair, as well as the spectacles that showcase the broader cultures beyond France. In the painting behind me by Louis Beroux, the first time this painting actually has been shown in the United States, we get one version of this framework, one example of how the world comes to Paris. In this magnificent work, the artist is showcasing a couple of things that are on view and are centered at these fairs. He's showcasing the technology and the engineering, as well as the people who came to the fair. Louis Beroux presents the World's Fair of 1889, and what he is presenting is one of the more spectacular forms of architecture in addition to the Eiffel Tower. In the background of the picture, you actually see the Eiffel Tower through the framed pane glass windows, but what we are looking at the sort of form of the painting overall is a frame of the Hall of Industry, or the Galerie des Machines. It was a magnificent feat of engineering that it was built solely for this exhibition alone, and its polychrome interior hides the engineering behind it, unlike the Eiffel Tower, whose engineering is exposed through the windows in the background. Now, the painting also showcases the world coming to Paris. There are a number of visitors to this Hall of Machines that suggest the well-to-do Europeans who came to visit the fair, in addition to the dignitaries from abroad who were present at the exposition. In addition to presenting outsiders who were coming to Paris as spectators, it was important to us to present the more complex representations of those who came to the city and who were sometimes brought to Paris to perform in the tradition of the exotic other. These living exhibits, which were intended to both educate and entertain, are showcased throughout the room in the Rue de Caire, or Cairo Street, as well as the phenomenon of the Javanese dancers. A dance troupe brought from the Dutch colony of Java, their performances were so popular that they continued their act beyond the exhibition, traveling to other Parisian and European venues under the direction of a Dutch colonial administrator. Beyond that, their distinctive gestures and costumes were replicated in many formats. This magnificent poster is in fact not an advertisement for the dance itself, but instead an announcement of their tableau at the Wax Museum. It is important to note that spectatorship remains a key part of the representation of this troupe here, and is featured in the poster, as well as in the life-size wax tableau that comprised not just the dancers on stage, but the male audience members, among them Buffalo Bill Cody, who also appears in the large vertical poster. At the 1900 exhibition, the Javanese dance took an entirely different form, appropriated by the French dancer Cléo de Merode in a multimedia attraction called Phono Cinema Théâtre, which synchronized film and sound. The objects we have collected here suggest not just the popularity of the Javanese dancers, but their appropriation across various media as objects of attraction.
From the massive scale of the Universal Expositions, we take you into the domestic sphere and the numbers of optical toys that were really popular commodities, teaching tools, entertainments during this period. On this round table, which evokes a kind of a parlor table, you'll see a number of optical toys, many of them borrowed from the Motion Picture Academy next door, which operate on various different optical principles of persistence of vision, of night and dark effects, of stereoscopy or 3D. And through these toys, people learned in a hands-on kind of a way how the optical system could be manipulated for pleasure, for fun, for storytelling. These were also sociable activities that people would engage in with friends, with family, so that optical entertainments and the illusion of motion, illusions of color and change and special effects became part of everyday life, even before cinema existed. Some of these toys also allowed projection, and that was a way you could have a sort of a private audience and start to build that sense of what it would mean to watch a movie together. We have some magic lanterns of various levels of sort of price and sophistication, where series of lantern slides would be used to tell stories, often with narration and other kinds of additive narrative components. Several of the optical toys in this gallery, for example, magic lanterns and praxinoscopes, were scaled up for use in larger public venues, as we see later in the show. These moving image innovations could be incorporated into existing public entertainment, such as the theater, the circus, vaudeville, and variety shows.
We've dedicated this gallery to the notion of the studio as a place of experimentation of innovation. After all, it's the same word that's used for the artists, for photographers, and eventually for film. In this gallery, we bring together artists that generally aren't placed together, such as Jean-Léon Gérôme, Edgar Degas, Georges Seurat, and Auguste François Villem. All of these artists were engaged in some form of experimentation or innovation with art and industry at the time. Some of them were exploring replication and reproduction of media, others were exploring color, and others were exploring the deconstruction or dissection of movement. François Villem invented the process known as photosculpture in the early 1860s to produce three-dimensional portraits with the ease of photographic cartes de visite. The client would have sat in the center of a circular room and was photographed simultaneously by 24 miniature cameras placed at 15 degrees around the room. Lantern slides of these images were then projected onto a clay cylinder while one worker traced the silhouette and another cut it into clay. Other workers would then model subtle details. In the case of our photosculpture here of the popular actress Rose Deschamps, the exquisite details of her costume would have been realized by another artisan. In the end, the process proved too labor-intensive to be profitable, and Villem's studio went out of business in 1868. Throughout this exhibition, we wanted to trace not just the successes, but also the failures. We show, for example, the Théâtre Optique in the adjoining gallery, as well as the method of photosculpture, neither of which survived the time. Like the rest of the show, our intent was to present an unfamiliar but much more realistic view of Paris in the late 19th century.
Of course, the Universal Expositions had drawn the world to come to Paris, but the film industry was built on going around the world. The film industry was a global industry from the start, and French camera operators went near and far to capture pictures of a world that was changing fast. Armchair tourism existed for centuries. We include wonderful magic lantern slides by the presenter Tanguy, for the first time shown anywhere in our exhibition, that was a show of going around the world. But Lumière operators also went around the world to French colonies such as Indochina, but also to China, Japan, and North America. There they hoped both to film a world that was rapidly changing and also to sell cameras and film stock to local businesses. Our show ends in 1907 with the establishment of purpose-built movie theaters. While film was a part of a broader visual culture, one of its most important qualities was its engagement with the public. If the public did not like the movies, they would not continue.
The exhibition ends with our salle de cinéma, where we present a 22-minute selection of films, many of which have been rarely, if ever, seen. Here, the visual form that was once a disposable distraction becomes an art form in its own right and close to the movie-going experience we're familiar with today.